Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. Hey.
Of course, Stephanie's clapping.
So, welcome, everybody. My name is Jim Anderson. Nice to see a ton of very familiar faces and some newbies as well. I work on the government innovation programs at the Bloomberg Foundation. And this, I really think, is like the session for the wonks at City Lab. So if you're in this session and you're a wonk, you're totally in the right place. So Bloomberg Foundation has been early investors in innovation in local government. We started funding innovation teams and innovation funds a decade ago. And back then, basically, to the degree that public sectors were investing in innovation, it was happening at the federal government, national government level. There was very little of this happening at the local government level. In fact, I think if Nigel is here, I think Boston might have been one of the only cities at that point in time that had made local investments in innovation capacity. When we think now about a decade has gone by, and this has become a movement, and people around the world at the local government level are so excited about the possibilities of making more rigorous and formal and methodical the approach that cities are bringing to innovation on their most critical problems. And we now can hardly keep up with all of the cities that are making these investments themselves. And so, we thought the time was right to really start investing in the research and the evidence around this movement that is taking form in cities around the world, and we called our incredible friends at the OECD. Today we're going to talk about an initial report that is coming out of this new partnership with the OECD. This report started with 90 cities. Some of them are leading cities, cities that are at the forefront of the municipal innovation movement. Others are newer investors in city innovation. But the report's purpose was really simple. It was to ask, what's driving cities to invest in innovation? How are they doing it? How are they delivering it? What are they expecting to get out of it? And by capturing that research and bringing an empirical sort of approach to it, we will also be set up over time to understand how these investments correlate with population level impacts and the results that we're all trying to create for our people. And that's incredibly exciting, and this field will need to be built on that type of evidence. So I'm incredibly excited about the report and what we're going to talk about today. Let me introduce my panelists, our guests today. Lamia Kamal is the director of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities. And I will say, if a single woman could help steer a big organization that by mission is focused on national governments to focus more clearly on cities and their possibilities, this is the woman who has really led the charge there. She's also just became a great friend. Mayor Victoria Woodards is the mayor of Tacoma, Washington, a mayor who has embraced innovation and all of its possibilities in a city where that tradition is rather short-lived, but where they're working to increase each and every day. And then Mayor Dagur Eggersston from Reykjavik, Iceland. I sat with him in Copenhagen a couple of weeks ago, and my mind was blown at just how advanced this city is in its investments in innovation. They've been there, done that, doing it for a while. So I think we'll have a really great conversation today about how cities are investing and what we're seeing, and hear from two practitioners on the ground. Two other quick points before I turn to some questions. Bloomberg Philanthropies and the OECD are also really excited today to announce this new map of innovation in cities. We sort of recognize that, we get calls all the time from people saying, who's doing really good prototyping? Who are the leaders in open innovation at the city level? Who's investing in citizen-sourced innovation? And we decided together that we would begin a collective effort to track this and to make a map available. And so today we publish a map of cities that are investing in innovation. There are 90 cities on the map today. We know that that's just a fraction of the cities that are already making municipal investments. So we invite you to look at the map to see if your city's on the map. And if you believe you should be on there, there's a really easy way to sign yourself up. We'll validate, we'll get you on there. And this will be a nice new way that we can all know who where we are and what we're doing in cities around the world. Finally, I just want to flag, for those of you in cities that have chief innovation officers, our innovation team led by Stephanie Wade, Roland Persad, Katie Appel-Duda, Andrea Coleman, we get a lot of calls from folks saying, what are the best innovation offices doing in cities around the world? We've just hired a new innovation officer. We want to upskill them. Starting today, we'll be taking applications from cities around the world that have made local investments in innovation officers for an innovation officer acceleration program that will last over 9 months. I think the way to get onto it is probably to go to Bloomberg Cities. We have a, how do we get there, Stephanie?
Send an email to innovationtraining@bloomberg.org.
Wow.
And watch our Twitter feed as well. There'll be lots of ways to find it. And
Awesome.
track us down.
Great. So Bloomberg Cities will have some great information for everybody on how to apply for that opportunity. So Lamia, let's turn the conversation to you, and maybe you can talk a little bit about why the OECD was excited about this partnership.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim, and thank you for your very, very nice words. It's true that we have been collaborating for a while, and it's always a pleasure to go back to this collaboration. So what is this report about? This report is about preparing cities for the future. We know that cities are facing big challenges already. They have to deal with issues related to economic development, job creation. They are facing rising inequalities. Yesterday, we have a tremendous, interesting discussion among mayors about that. They are facing the impact of climate change. But all this is happening in a context where there is a deep uncertainty for the future. So when we talk about the future, for instance, we are talking about different mega trends, and one of them, just to mention it, is like digital, how digitalization is going to affect cities. And actually at the OECD, we have documented that 14% of jobs are at a high risk of being automated in OECD countries on average, 10% for the United States. But when we look at this data, the geography of it, we found that some cities will have the jobs in some cities will be exposed to up to 40%. So this is big. We have to prepare the cities for the futures. So one thing that we have been doing is we are looking at how cities need to develop new tools, new strategy to reimagine the old systems and to plan better for the futures. This is, of course, true for all levels of government, but even more so for cities which have a key role to play. So I'm very proud of the work that we have accomplished together, and officially, this is an OECD tradition that we have to hand over the report to James. What is this in this report? You mentioned that already. We survey 89 cities, but we provide an analytical framework along 5 dimensions. And let me tell you about these 5 dimensions. The first dimension is related to the question of goals and strategies for innovation. The second dimension focuses on the question of the organizational structure within municipal administration. For instance, whether they have designated staff, they have a team or a unit within the local administration. The third dimension is about funding, a very important issue, of course, whether cities have dedicated funding and where does it come from. The fourth dimension is related to data, how municipalities generate or manage the data, or simply is the data available? And last but not least, the fifth dimension is related to how cities are measuring the impact of their innovation action. So it's mainly about monitoring and evaluation. So let me now, maybe we have a poll that you have maybe to launch, and I want to go back to the result of the poll.
Great. Okay, great. Do we have the poll?
Oh.
Okay. I think I totally missed this in the introduction. Why don't we take the poll now? Everybody, if you have your smartphones, please go to the following website, pollev.com. So take a moment, pull up your browsers, pollev.com/CityLab 2019-335. reveal the poll results in real time.
Yes.
Folks finding it all right? Great. We did this with the mayors yesterday, and you might be surprised to know the mayors managed it really well.
Thank you. I wondered.
I think except for Rosalind Bliss, she was really stuck. So why don't we turn to the next slide and we can see the poll results coming in.
Yes. Okay, I see. Interesting. So, as you can see, the poll is about the fourth dimension that I just mentioned in our analytical framework. It's about resources and funding, how cities are paying for innovation. So we asked the 89 cities the same question that were asked to you, whether they have funding to support innovation and what were the most common source of funding. And actually, the results are that 77% of the cities surveyed have dedicated funding to support innovation. And how much do we have now? Can we? Yes. Wow. Here
Right.
we have 84.
What a surprise.
Yes. That's interesting.
Wouldn't have been the answer a couple
Yes.
years ago.
So it means that people don't know to what extent, you know, the scale of the involvement of cities in having dedicated funding for innovation. But among all these cities, among all of them, 90% actually they have committed resource from their own municipal budget, because in the report we discuss, you know, where this funding come from, and almost all municipalities, they commit some funding from their own sources of from their municipal budget. And then we look, of course, in the report other source of funding, and we saw some geographical difference between, for instance, United States and Canada. You receive a lot of the local government receive a lot of funding, for instance, from philanthropic organizations like Bloomberg Philanthropies, but also others. Whilst in Europe or in Asia, the federal government is really helping cities to get more funding to fund their innovation program.
So Lamia, to what end? What does the research say about the results that cities are attaining with these investments?
Yes, so the question of the impact is really important, because cities are not engaging in innovation just for the sake of innovation. They want to bring results. So we ask the following question to the cities: what their investment in innovation were helping them to do better. And actually the top 3 responses were improved service delivery, for instance, emergency services, housing, mobility, social services. Improve internal operation, it's about streamlining budget processes and workflows, or fostering inter-agency cooperation. And the third one is about improving resident outcomes, for instance, in terms of healthcare or employment.
So one of the other really fascinating results of the survey is we asked all of the city participants to tell us what factors do they think are most important to drive successful, effective innovation within City Hall. The answers that came back I thought were really great. Number 1, having strong teams and dedicated innovation staff. So overwhelmingly, we know that City Hall workers are stressed, and if we want to take innovation seriously, we need to invest in the people and make it their day jobs. It doesn't mean that they're the only people who have an obligation to innovate, but we know that they can play a catalytic role in bringing these tools and techniques into city government and creating space for people to take risks, to nurture new ideas. We need people focused on that. Secondly, and not unrelatedly, was culture. So we heard that a culture of innovation where municipal staff are encouraged to experiment, take risks, and learn from failure is key. I know I can speak from my own time in government with Mike. He was amazing at that. And you know, the mayor always saying, let's try something new, and if you goof it up, I'm there for you. I've got your back, is a really important part of creating, building that culture. Other factors that came up in the survey, data management capabilities. We saw and heard from all of you that cities see a very tight connection between data and innovation, which is exciting. Dedicated resources, as Lamia mentioned. And the factor that came out at the very top was leadership. 80% of the cities said leadership commitment was the single most important determinant of successful innovation work. So we're fortunate to have a couple of city leaders here who I think can speak to the important role of leadership. Let me start with Tacoma Mayor Woodards. Mayor, we've seen an important form of innovation in cities in the way they prototype new solutions in low-cost, quick ways before going to full implementation. How has prototyping been a cost and time saver in Tacoma?
So I'll give you a perfect example of what we did here in Tacoma shortly after I got back from Bloomberg Harvard. One of the things they taught us is how to take risks. And as policymakers or as elected leaders, we're not normally good at taking real risk because we don't want to piss off too many people. So it's really hard sometimes to do things quickly because we want to kind of take our time. But when I got back, we were getting calls to pilot scooters in Tacoma. And you know, talk to staff, and staff, I love you all dearly, but sometimes we get bogged down in the minutia, and they're like, it'll be at least 6 months before we can do this. We have to get rules, we've got to check into all of this. And I said, no, we're gonna do it in 2 weeks, because I learned at Bloomberg Harvard that you can get things done, you can do a pilot, and we're gonna do it in 2 weeks. And you guys probably know how my staff reacted. But we did it. And we brought a solution to Tacoma for last mile, first and last mile. We brought a solution to Tacoma that people also enjoyed, but that you could get, if you were in the downtown core, you didn't have to get in your car and drive to the other side. So, I mean, it really worked out. And in 2 weeks, we stood it up. It's now been almost 18 months. And we are still going strong. So the pilot never ended, but we learned from the pilot and then implemented what the permanent rules would be after the pilot.
So you started with a smaller scale,
Absolutely.
minimum viable product.
Absolutely.
In a smaller area, smaller number of scooters, learned lessons, and now you've expanded beyond?
Well, we did citywide, but we've expanded the number of scooters. So I think we started with 250, which is, you know, a very small number, and now we're up to 1,000. So we started very small in the downtown core, and then after a while we said, you know what, we also want to test this out. We had it in some neighborhoods, but we wanted to make sure it was really important to us to make sure that every neighborhood had access. So we made sure it was in every neighborhood, and we're up to 1,000 scooters in Tacoma now.
You also used prototyping to help begin a needed conversation between your police and the community around trust.
Yep.
Why don't you talk a little bit about Project Peace 2.0?
Okay, so before I was mayor, I was on the city council, and we started, we started a project called Project Peace, which was really about how to have better relationships between our police officers and our citizens. We were around the city. We had 5 different evening meetings. They were about 3.5 hours each in different kinds of communities, in different communities in Tacoma, and that worked really well. We had not just police management, but frontline police officers who participated, and they began to build relationships, and that did okay. But then it kind of, we did that and everybody thought it was good. Well, we do a survey like most cities do every couple of years and found out that in Tacoma, while 85% of white citizens felt safe, communities of color were 50% more likely not to feel safe. And so we realized that number didn't mean that we just needed more police, that we could put 1 million police on the streets and some communities would never feel safe. And so it got back to how do we continue to build on those relationships? And so we prototyped through, with Stephanie's help. I'm so glad to see her because she was on our team. She came out to Tacoma. But so we prototyped a couple of things. We started out doing things as simple as standing in, when we did our survey work, we went out to community colleges, to libraries, to grocery stores, and actually had one-on-one conversations with people who lived in our city to figure out what is it that we could do. So we ended up prototyping 2 things at the end. One is they're thinking of doing, and we haven't rolled it out yet, so we're working on this, of taping conversations between a police officer and either a citizen or a group of citizens, and then people being able to watch that on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever else they watch it. I'm not the technical person. But that would be a way to kind of get to know a police officer. The other thing we found, which is really interesting in our surveying, is that people engage better in getting to know a police officer out of uniform. Mm-hmm. And we very much, and most people already know that, but to actually get data that told us that was the case, because we have a police chief who really thought that the only way for them to be professional was to always be in uniform. So officers would not come into public meetings out of uniform. So we are now prototyping at what point does it make sense, or where is it possible for those police officers to be in uniform? When is that important? And when is it important for them to be out of uniform so that they can build the relationship first? Because obviously that uniform in itself sends fear to people or makes people uncomfortable. So those are the two things we've prototyped. But I will say kind of one of our successes really quickly, if I can share that, in just putting together our innovation team. So in the Pacific Northwest, we also are home to a tribal nation, to the Puyallup tribe in Tacoma. And our police relations between the tribe and our police department had not been all that great. So while we were thinking of just residents, we invited them in to be a part of our innovation team. And even the very first day, Stephanie, I don't know if you remember that, we had a tribal council member and his police chief come. And he at one point wanted to leave because he felt the tribal council member felt so uncomfortable in the room, but he sat in his discomfort, ended up not only staying the whole day, came back the next day. And they've been a part of this process. This summer, we had an uptick in gang violence in our community. We had a shooting that happened at a tribal member's house. So they have jurisdiction, but we still have a part of that jurisdiction. By the time that incident was over, there were accolades from the tribal police and tribal government leaders saying that was the best our relationship had ever been and how well we worked together in that. And that's because we built innovation through the innovation track. We built the relationship through the innovation track.
Awesome. What a story.
Actually, what the mayor has just described is typically something that we have documented in the report is the human-centered design approach. And this is something that we have seen more and more implemented by many cities, and actually 40% of the cities surveyed among the 89 say that they have followed the same type of human-centered design approach. So what is it? It's about putting people at the center of the solution, but also engaging people impacted by a specific problem in co-designing and co-developing and co-implementing the solutions together.
Great. And an approach that Bloomberg Philanthropies champions right and left. So it's great to see the way that you're applying that in your community in such a powerful way. Mayor Eggersston, let's start with, I'm very interested in the way that you, over the last, I think, year or so, have tried to formalize and sort of centralize the approach to, not centralize, actually push innovation out across your entire administration. Talk a little bit about what you've done.
Yeah, we've been focusing for some time on innovation, as you mentioned, but I'm of the opinion that we can do better. So we've been highlighting innovation as a major task of all parts of the city government. We have special offices of innovation within welfare, experimenting with technology solutions for the elderly. We have set up a new think tank in education to implement a new educational strategy with giving out funds for every school to develop on that. But the big kind of focus in on transformation within services across the board. So I have a board of directors, the people that report directly to me. So one of the changes we made this year is that one of these directors is responsible for service and innovation. That's his title. So he's not just focusing on his tasks, but working across the board with everyone. And the idea to elevate that within the kind of structural organization is that everybody should see this as a major task within the city.
And so, so when did you make that change?
June.
And are you sensing it's making a difference, and in what ways?
Well, at least I'm presenting the budget next week, and it seems that the money going to these things
It's up.
yeah, considerably. But a part of this, we are also kind of, we want clearer reporting on the progress, how we are doing, what comes out of not just the new technical solutions, but the new processes and the kind of the work done within government. We recently redid the structure of, which surprises some, that we took the task of applying for social benefits and made it into an app, so everyone could get an answer within minutes. That would have been a process with social workers for, and through that we are both innovating, but we are also sending a message of empowerment that this is something that you can need for a period of time, and we are helping you with it as a city, not kind of asking you all sorts of difficult questions in person. So we try to integrate it also in how we meet people and work with them.
Awesome. Data plays a pretty significant role in the way that you think about innovation. I know that data has played a central role in the phenomenal work your city's done to curb youth tobacco utilization rates. Can you talk a little bit about the connection between data and innovation in Reykjavik?
Yes, this is very close to my heart. I come from medicine before becoming a mayor, and the situation in Reykjavik when I was growing up was that in the weekends the streets were filled with young people, underage people. And actually in 1998, Reykjavik had the highest numbers of teenage drinking, smoking, and use of drugs. And I'm sure that everyone in the room has heard stories of cities that are struggling with drug issues and far too young people using drugs. So the short story is that in 2017, we had gone from being the city with the highest numbers in Europe to being the cities with the lowest numbers in all three aspects. And that was no coincidence. We worked with social scientists, social workers, schools, family and parent organizations, sports clubs, and through monitoring the situation in every school, in every year, we got data of how young people felt, what they were doing, how their relationship with their parents, etc. It's vast, the information we are gathering, but we quite early on managed to define both the risk factor and the protective factors in the environment of the children. And by working systematically with each and every school district, with the parents groups, with the sports clubs, and putting in targeted initiatives to push for the right things and avoid the wrong things, we have seen a kind of slow but steady path towards better results year after year. Now we have been very open with this. Now we are trying it out in around 30 cities in Europe. Wow. Some of them are already seeing very good results out of it. So we think that we have a low-cost, highly effective, evidence-based model of working with young people, postponing alcohol or drug use in their life. And that's based on data collection. But I have to stress also the enthusiasm and immense work of different people, just talking about it. The effect of defining something as a problem, and although you do not have all the solutions for it straight away, just pushing for it. And I mean, halfway into this story, we introduced the leisure card. It's a voucher system that makes all children from the age 6 to 18, they can purchase doing soccer or playing the piano, etc. So we have numbers of what our teenagers do, and children, in all parts of the city. So we know that now they're over 80% active from 6 to 18 years old. And we know where we have the lower numbers and have to have extra efforts. I could actually talk about this all day.
What's interesting and worth just going a little bit deeper on is the way that your city has embraced sort of bottoms-up solutions and engaging citizens and getting that energy and bringing it back into city policy making to sort of, continue to push out new stuff. And I think another great example of that is Better Reykjavik. Can you describe briefly what that capacity allows your city to do from a policy making perspective?
Yeah, Better Reykjavik is a kind of ideas platform. Its origin is interesting. We had an economic crash with a bankruptcy of 3 major banks in Iceland and social unrest. Unemployment rose from 1% to 13% over a year, and the debts soared of households, of companies, of municipalities, and Reykjavik and the state. But some programmers created a platform called Shadow Parliament, where they created this just space for people to talk about the solutions for the future in a country of economic collapse. In Reykjavik, we asked the same people to do this actually when we were creating a majority in 2010. We didn't want to be very open with exactly that process. So we said, okay, we are going to have secret meetings, but we have asked these people to have this open platform for your ideas to go straight into the process. And they did. And after the elections, we asked them to develop Better Reykjavik, which is 2 things, both an idea platform, but then we kind of took a twist and added a participatory budgeting element. So ideas of new public works within each neighborhood go through an election. You don't just pick, so all the ideas of addition to the local swimming pool or something nice come from the citizens, and it's totally transparent who has the idea. Then it's kind of calculated how much money it needs, and then you vote for it. Not just a single idea, but it's like an Amazon basket. You have a certain amount, and then you pick kind of your 4 or 5 ideas within your neighborhood. And this has been going on now for 8 years, so we have literally hundreds of citizen projects that have been funded and make the city better. So yeah, the name is Better Reykjavik, and it truly is.
Yes, this is very inspiring, Mayor. We're very proud, actually, that you are part of our coalition of champion mayors for inclusive growth. We have another mayor here from Freetown who is also a member of this coalition. So it's a group of mayors that have put the fight against inequality and the question of inclusion at the core of the mandate. And we want them because, as you mentioned, I'm serving an international organization that is mainly serving national governments, but having the voice at the table is super important. So thank you very much. You mentioned your action. Actually, what is really behind the success is citizen engagement. And in the report, I'm not going to tell you the numbers. 57% of cities surveyed are using innovation to engage residents in new ways. And 80% actually have established formal partnership with the residents. Like Reykjavik, actually in the report we have documented how other cities like Athens, Bologna, and Atlanta in the United States have also set up community engagement programs, sometimes online, sometimes not, and how they are helping to shape the local agendas. In my own cities, I'm going to promote my own cities, Paris. We have something that looks like the Better Reykjavik, sorry, called Ideas for Paris. And actually, it's an online platform, but the mayor herself, she's looking at the result. So it's a way to communicate with the mayor some of the important ideas. As you know, I'm serving in one of her strategic committees, so I have the advantage to input. But when I go back home and I'm in my bed before sleeping, I like to be a normal citizen and input through the website. It's a great pleasure to do that.
Awesome, that's great. Actually, a little bit later today, we'll be hearing from Cities of Service, I think in the closing plenary, announcing this year 100 and some cities applied to be recognized through the Engaged Cities Award for cutting-edge strategies to engage citizens in problem solving. And you're soon to hear who the 3 winners of this year's competition are. Really, really inspiring ways that mayors are tapping the power of citizens to build trust, but also to produce impact. So final question for the 3 of you, and then we're happy to take some questions from the audience, so please get them ready. You know, in 30 seconds, and Lamia, let's start with you. What is the most important thing that mayors and those that are leading innovation in cities can do to build their capacity to solve problems and deliver results?
Okay, actually in this report, we have produced together kind of checklist for actions for mayors and local government officials with 18 recommendations that are organized along the 5 dimensions that we have been discussing today. So there are many recommendations. I have on the top of my mind the fact that having, for instance, a dedicated unit is really helping. The question of leadership from the mayor. But one thing that I want to mention, and I wanted to say that earlier, is really the question of evaluation and monitoring the outcomes. In the survey, we found out actually that only 16% of cities are doing systematic and comprehensive evaluation of their innovation programs. This is really small.
It was 16, not 60.
16, 1/6. Yeah. Only 16%.
Yeah.
Some of them, they are assessing bits and pieces of their innovation approaches or actions, but it's most of them are saying, you know, it's too soon to do it. But I think it's important that in the future we worked so that we can improve this part, so that you can get the support precisely of the citizen when you engage funding from the municipal government budget, for instance.
Thank you. So a real focus on evaluation and measurement you would prioritize. Mayor Woodards, what do you think?
For elected leaders, again, I said this a little bit earlier, I think take risks. If you're going to innovate doesn't mean waiting for perfection to innovate. Innovate means taking a chance. And even if it's small, again, we're told so much not to take risks. We want everything to be perfect. But I think if you take a risk on something small, it can turn into something big. And don't be afraid to fail.
Words to live by. Mayor Eggersston, how about you?
Yeah, I think maybe on a similar note to embrace change, but also I want to raise the point of having a vision and a strong vision and stick by it, because I think that it's very important that people sense and know why we are doing this. We're not just fiddling with stuff or changing things. It's because of something, and it's because the society we want. It's because the service we want to deliver, or the fact that we have to reprioritize and be smarter about things. And that's, I think that the visionary part of it and the stamina to hold on to it is very important.
I think that's so true, and it's very, I think the example that Mayor Woodards identified around how the tools and approaches of innovation are actually front and center with tough and important issues that all of our cities are dealing with, like police and community relations. You know, I think we've made a lot of traction in the last decade. I think now when people talk about innovation in cities, they're not immediately thinking about tech. They're not immediately thinking about apps. They're starting to think more and more about the bread and butter things that local governments do to be inclusive of everyone, to articulate the values that we want to lead our cities by, and that innovation can be a facilitator and a driver of those core civic values that we stand for, and that's what it's about. And so I really agree with that statement. And so with that, we would love to take a few questions from those of you. I don't know if we need microphones. Oh, we've got microphone runners here. So Stefan, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, James. My name is Stéphane Vincent. I run a non-profit association based in Paris, and we are lucky enough to have a great partnership with you at Bloomberg, so thank you again for that. As James said, we have made a lot of progress the last decades, and especially in terms of methodology, user-centered methodology, but it seems that maybe the next step is also to improve the governance of innovation. How do you govern innovation in the city hall? For instance, there is a risk that we create innovation silos with data stuff going there and user-centered services going there, etc. So both in your survey at OECD, did you see many kinds of governance of innovation? And if so, did you find more interesting examples that could inspire us? And as mayors, for instance, you said that you got this person in charge of service and innovation. How do you, in the next decade, what would be your best dream to have a better government? Or, for instance, is the mayor should be in charge of innovation itself, or is it for a deputy mayor? Do you have to create an innovation unit or not? Or what is your perspective about this idea of governance of innovation?
Yes, actually at this stage, we have documented the different approach. And it's always better to have a unit, to have at least, a dedicated staff. Now, where the staff should be, of course, if you create a new department, you can have this silos effect. So sometimes, some of the cities decided to have this unit under the leadership of the mayor or the city manager, because then these people can create this cross-sectoral synergy between the different activities. Now we have to see in the long run, because in many other activities, we found out that there is a moment where maybe in a couple of years, this will be the new normal. But in the early stage, it's always good to have a structure that is really horizontal. And of course, the other aspect of governance that we have to take into account is involvement of external actors. So who should that be? We have been talking about residents, but there are a lot of companies that are also involved in the processes. And here we have to be very careful about the type of companies to avoid conflict of interest. Of course, the large companies, they are very active and they can provide very relevant input because also they are involved in the implementation of some of the programs. But we need to be careful that we are not excluding all the other companies in town. So this is something that matters a lot for the local governments that we have been interviewing.
Great. And Dagur, just in terms of your experience and who owns it and how you both do it through the verticals, but also in a horizontal way, what's been your experience?
Yeah, well, our organizational chart, if you like, is kind of welfare, education, environment and planning, culture, sports, and then we got finance, human resources, and innovation and services. So it's going through everything. If you ask me about organizational charts in 10 years, I would never suggest that you don't change it, because I am of the opinion that You need to be innovative also when it comes to how you organize the internal structures of a city, and be prepared to change it if the tasks are changing or your priorities. So changing it is an innovation in itself, and we have to evaluate it, and if it's not working, we change it. So that's maybe the short answer.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, please, right here in the front. Thanks, Noel.
Hi, thank you all for your very unique insights. Mayor, I'm particularly interested in
Who are you, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
I'm Stephanie Headings, and I'm with the City of New Orleans as the Director of Innovation. The idea of having a pilot program or a prototype is definitely something that we are interested in doing. I guess the difficulty that we see is after piloting, how do we make sure that we have the right resources there, make it sustainable, and are still able to move forward with other innovation projects? So how do we make sure that we're not moving too quickly without making the foundation correct and providing what it is that we need for that?
So I think as we talk about the structure, the fact that it's either a department, somebody's got to wake up every day and think about innovation, especially when you're first starting out. But I think before you embark on a project, recognizing what you might, not what you necessarily want the outcome to be because you can't control it, but what you're willing to do with the information you get. Because I think you have to set expectations when you're engaging, especially residents, in something that's innovative. They want to know, well, after we do all this work, what happens to it? And so you kind of have to have, I think, a little bit of that idea up front of either what you're willing to spend or how far you're willing to go, because otherwise, then you've done that engagement process for naught, and you may get some really good innovative ideas, but if you don't have anything to pour them back into and actually use them or any way to use them, then what's the point in figuring out how to innovate? And so I think you have to kind of think about that up front. I think it's also very important, again, it's not going to be perfect. And lose that. Absolutely lose that, and be willing to be nimble. But I think setting kind of a little bit of the expectation up front is a way to make sure that you can follow through on the end of the process.
Very good advice. And really, I don't think the report looked in detail. I think this issue of 10 years in, a lot of the innovation that we're still seeing in local governments is at the pilot level. And so how we move from pilot to scale, I think, remains sort of one of the challenges that we're all struggling to figure out. I was recently in Tel Aviv and got to spend a little bit of time with the innovation team there and saw a terrific example of a prototype that has now gone to citywide scale and is driving phenomenal impact in the way that the city is approaching early childhood supports for citizens. But those examples are the exceptions rather than the rule, I think, for the most part. And there's more to learn, and I think more to research around how teams manage that balance of let's test new things and then pass things off to go to full implementation, I think, is a real challenge for us. Let's go to the back of the room. Yes.
Hi there, Katrina Foley, Costa Mesa Mayor in California, and it's been a year that we've been studying scooters. So I'm going to go back and take your advice and get it done in 2 weeks. So, so send me the plan.
We didn't have one.
We'll send you Stephanie.
The other question I had, we recently went to district elections. So our city council's 6 council members and a directly elected mayor. And so the 6 districts all represent neighborhoods. So I like your idea of giving the neighborhood the empowerment to kind of help decide what their public works projects are. And I'd like to know a little bit about how did you gather the information? Is it all online, or did you do written surveys? And then finally, how did you decide, other than by voting, in terms of the budget part of it? Mm-hmm. How did you decide which ones to prioritize in each neighborhood?
There's a few elements to this. Firstly, we gather the ideas, and that's a very open process in all the neighborhoods. Then it goes like other ideas of public works through the public works department that estimate what each and every project costs. It gets a review with a neighborhood committee, partly represented by people that live there. And then it gets into the election phase. The budget, it's split between the neighborhoods in kind of two ways. A kind of sum of money that every neighborhood gets, and then on top of that, based on the population of every neighborhood. So the most kind of, the small also get some money, but the bigger get more money. And then it's just up for grabs, and people can deliberate and discuss ideas, both at first and after they come in for the voting. But it's all done electronically and quite easily.
Thank you. We are out of time. I want to thank the great panel for sharing some of their thoughts and let everybody know that this was the first phase of research. There's some copies of the report, I believe, in the back of the room. Stay tuned, because the next phase of this report is we'll be looking at using OECD's incredible big data to understand what some of the population level impacts that might be correlated with these investments. A lot more data soon to come. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
May I add something? If I may, I would like to add something. If you like the report, you have to thank two persons in the room, is Aziza Ahmouche and Andrea, who is there.
Great.
Right?
Thank you.